Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
What's up, y'all? I'm KC.
And I'm Tyler, and this is another Big Buck Breakdown from the Element Podcast.
Brought to you by Exodus Trail Cameras.
All right, now on the phone, we've got Parker McDonald from Southern Ground Hunting. Parker, you texted me a couple of days ago, and I was just going to sleep, I think, when I got the text. I didn't remember getting it until 5 a.m, but it said that I had read it, so I must have just set my phone on the table when you texted me. But you were asking for prayers, and so I did say one at 5 a.m, and then texted you, and you at the time were trying to find a deer. You sent me some video that shows the shot and these kind of things, and we're like going through some stuff, talking about it. And I'll be frank with you, I couldn't tell the butt end from the head end of that deer in that video. So anyway, I don't want to spoil anything from this point forward, but go ahead and let me know how this story started out and how it ended.
Yeah, so basically that video that you got, Tyler, was so I shoot in 4K. I shoot everything in 4K so that I can do that, so I can make sure I can get the shot on camera, especially if it's a buck or something and I know I want to have the shot 100% on film, and I don't, maybe in a lot of those thicket, real thicker areas, it's hard to watch a little viewfinder while you're trying to get a shot, and so I just keep everything zoomed out so that I can do that. So that video was super grainy because I was as zoomed in as I possibly could be on that completely zoomed out footage. Mm-hmm. So it was definitely hard to tell, but basically, if anybody listening to this has watched any of my videos, listened to the podcast or anything like that, I'm definitely a public land guy. That's kind of what I'm normally doing. And I've got a buddy named Aaron here in Alabama, and he goes to church with me. I'm a worship pastor at my church. That's my full-time job. And he was actually a teenager in our youth group years and years ago whenever I was leading the youth worship team. And so I kind of taught him how to play guitar and all this stuff. Well, we've always kind of talked about hunting, but not a ton. That wasn't our common interest, was really music. And now that I've moved back here and I'm the worship pastor at the church, he follows the Southern Ground stuff, and he always sends me a text every year. He's like, "Hey dude, you need to come out to my hunting camp. You need to come to my camp with me. Come on dude, just come to my camp." And I'm like, it's not really I don't really want to go to a hunting club. I like the public land the challenge of doing public land and kayak hunting and all that stuff. And so finally last week, I was just like, you know what? I'm not seeing any deer on public in my spots. I'd shot a couple does, but I wasn't seeing much for bucks. I was like, a change of scenery would be good. I'll take him up on his offer. So I went with him last Friday, the day after the statewide opener. So the zone I normally hunt, the public I normally hunt, it opened actually 2 weeks earlier this year. So I went and hunted with him at his camp and saw some deer. Nothing crazy. I didn't see any bucks. I saw some does and fawns and stuff. But kind of the way that I wanted to do it was I didn't want to sit on their green field. So Southern guys will know what I'm talking about. We have hunting clubs out here where you have a bunch of guys that lease this property and they have green fields and corn piles and all that stuff. And that's not really my thing. Like I'm not against it as long as it's legal to hunt over corn or bait. Like that's great. It's just not really what I do. Like I just don't have necessarily any desire to do it. And so I just wanted to kind of run and gun on this public. And one of the things that I've always said since I started hunting on public and really learning how to do it was that I would like to test my skill someday on a hunting club again and see if I can come out of there killing more bucks than I did before. And so I was like, I'm just going to run and gun. So I tried running and gunning out there. One evening I sat on a green field just for the heck of it. I hadn't done it in a long time and didn't actually see any deer that day. So we went back again. So I guess I'm making this story longer than it needs to be, but I want to be really detailed. This past weekend, it was raining pretty much in the whole state. Like all of the public that I hunt from one side of the state to the other, I'm basically right in the middle. All the public was going to be in rain and thunderstorms all day on Saturday. So I was like, crap, I don't really want to go sit out in the rain. I don't want to be out in a storm while I'm in my kayak. Like there's just some dangerous stuff about that I just don't really want to do at this point in my life. And so I texted Aaron. I was like, hey man, are you still going? Because he had invited me earlier in the week. And he said, yeah, dude. He's like, I'll meet you at 4:00. I was like, okay, cool. So we go out there that morning and it's raining. We get out there that, kind of late. I was like, well, I'm just going to go sit, since it's been raining all night and it just kind of stopped. I'm going to go sit on this green field over here just for the first part of the morning. Then we'll get down and we'll scout. So I did that, ended up getting busted by a young buck. And then that evening, so this is where the story actually kind of gets a little more exciting. So that evening he was like, hey man, I want to show you like some of our green fields and some of our areas that we hunt, just so you can see what it's like, And I was like, okay, cool. So we get to this cutover and, in the South, especially this part of Alabama, it's in a town called Hamilton, Alabama. It's right on the Mississippi state line, pretty much in the north part of Alabama. And there's a lot of timber cut areas, and they have these cutovers, and then they have planted pines. And so he brought me to this 160-acre piece of land that they have leased, and it's all like 2-year-old planted pines. So they're about 6 feet tall or so. And I mean, it's just vast hillsides, like rolling hills of these planted pines and grown up grass and stuff like that in there. And he took me to this green field and I was like, man, there's a lot more deer sign in this field. I said, well, what's down behind that? He's like, oh, it's just like a little creek or whatever. And I was like, well, can we go check it? And he's like, I mean, yeah, we can if you want to. And I was like, man, it just looks good. So there's an SMZ strip that runs along this creek that goes into the cutover. And I basically was treating it like the Oak Islands that Dan Infalt talks a lot about up north, like in those marshes. Do y'all know what I'm talking about? Like the marshland with the Oak Islands?
Yeah, but I don't know what an SMZ strip is. What is that?
So SMZ is, I can't even tell you what it stands for. I used to know this, but I can't even remember. But it's like when they do these big cuts, they'll leave a thin strip of woods along a creek of like hardwoods and oaks.
Yeah.
That follow this creek. For whatever reason, they leave it. I think it has something to do with like fertilization or something.
Yeah, it's probably creek bank erosion too, I would imagine, is a big part of it.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
It's just, it's just big, tall, thin strip of woods. And so I was looking at that and I was looking at it on the map. And I actually had asked him earlier in the day if that was still there. And he said, no, they cut all that down. And I was like, okay, well, let's go check it out. So we go and check it out, and I can see that thin strip, that SMZ strip right there, like perfectly from the top of the hill. And that's why I want to look at it, because basically it's number one, it's a hard transition line that's right there.
Yeah.
And two, when you got those big pine, like 160 acres of pines, there is some natural browse in there, but those acorns this time of year are going to be what they're going to be going after. And I thought, if I could get at the first available, like hard mass like that, then I could be in a money spot.
Parker talked about a very specific habitat type in this episode. It's that situation where you got a clear cut that runs down and meets a creek, and there's a thin strip of timber right along that creek. Sounds like a great place to hunt. It also sounds like a great place to hang a trail camera if you've got a place like that on your property. An Exodus trail camera would be awesome in this situation, because in the thick stuff, man, sometimes it is hard to identify bucks, or at least understand if it's a shooter or not. And if you use a trail camera like an Exodus Lift 2 that has a really high megapixel count and takes great video and pictures, you can identify bucks. You can get familiar with bucks, and then you will know exactly what deer it is as soon as you see it, and you don't have to pause and think, is this a deer I want to shoot or not? You can identify it, know that that's a shooter, and be ready to take your shot. So go check out ExodusOutdoorGear.com.
So we walk down there into that creek, and I see kind of a transition line from hardwoods to the pines. And I told Aaron, I said, hey, come here, come look at this. And I said, there's going to be a trail right here when we get to this. I promise you there's going to be a trail following this SMZ strip and the pine transition. And sure enough, we get up there and there's a trail. Well, what I was not expecting was a bunch of rubs, fresh rubs right there on that. Now, this time of year, in this specific area, the rut's in January. So this time of year is not, you're not going to find a lot of rubs unless you find like random ones from them rubbing off velvet, which they're not even going to be all that fresh right now. But these were like wet, like they were fresh. You could see the shavings on the ground, which made me believe that I was in a core area of a buck, because he's just now getting away from his bachelor group, more than likely. Out here, and he's starting to mark territory close to where he lives. It's really tight into his living quarters at that point. And you're not going to see a lot of like more of the rut sign that you would see, a little later in the season. And so I thought, man, I've got to set up here, because that buck is right here somewhere. He's bedded down in these thick pines. And he's going to come right here. He's rubbing all this because this is his first available food source. He's spending a lot of time here. I told Aaron, I was like, dude, we need to get out of here, because that buck is probably watching us right now, because we haven't been super quiet. I was like, that buck is probably bedded. And I pointed up to the top of a hill. The wind was in our favor, so our wind wasn't blowing to him. I was like, that buck is probably bedded right there. And he was like, when you tell a guy who's not used to that style of hunting something that specific, they kind of look at you like you're stupid. Like, oh yeah, really? He's bedded right there.
Yeah.
He's watching us, and Aaron's a great dude. I'm not trying to trash talk him at all. Like, Aaron's an awesome dude. But when y'all been there before, when you like, hey, I bet you I can find a single hair in the woods. I can find a white deer hair and just pull it out of nowhere. Like, people look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah.
But we can't. I mean, that's what, when you're used to hunting public land, you have to learn those little things that guys hunting over bait piles really don't have to learn. And so we went and got something to eat, and I started looking at the map and just really kind of putting it together as much as I could, where that buck was going to travel at. So after lunch, we got done with lunch, and I wanted to be in the tree early because the temperature was dropping quick. All day. I mean, it dropped probably 20 degrees throughout the day. And so we got set up about 2:00, and I mean, this buck did exactly what I thought he was going to do, which made me feel really good. It made me feel like I'm not an idiot,
Yeah, because most of the time on public land, you feel like an idiot, So.
That's the thing, man, is I have not seen, I've had one encounter with a huge buck last Saturday. Actually, he bedded down. I was on public, almost the same type of scenario. It wasn't the SMZ, but it was like an oak cluster right off of a cutover. And I had an encounter with a big buck that morning, and he ended up bedding down in the cutover like 80 yards away from me all day. So I had to sit and wait him out, and I never got a shot at him.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the only buck encounter I've had in Alabama this year. And so you start to wonder, like, do I know what I'm doing? Like, am I stupid? Do I just get lucky during the rut sometimes? And or the early season deer that you killed, like, you're like, maybe it's just luck. Maybe it's just dumb luck, and I'm not actually learning anything. And so, but I still try to be confident. You know, you try to speak with confidence and feel confident about your choices. And so that buck about 6 o'clock comes barreling out of that cutover, out of that the pines, and starts working his way right down that rub line straight to me.
Ugh.
And it was one of those things. It's so thick in there. It was one of those things where I was like, man, I don't know if I'm going to get a shot at him. I'd seen a doe earlier in the afternoon, and she didn't come into my direction. She just kind of walked into the oaks, ate some acorns, and left. But he started coming straight to me on a string. Turned the camera on, got it set, and the buck was looking like I knew he was a decent deer. You know, I was trying not to concentrate on the antlers, honestly. And it was so thick, and it was starting to get a little bit dark. All I could see was that there was just a decent sized frame on him, you know. And so I knew I was going to shoot him. And he walked into a little hole, and kind of his body language turned like he was about to go back the other direction, which would make sense to me. He didn't just booger out, but he was walking around where we had walked that afternoon, and just was kind of like, I don't really know. And so the way his body language was, he wasn't going to walk into my big shooting lane that I had. And so I kind of had to just pick a hole. And as soon as he stopped in that hole, I shot. And so that was, I mean, I thought I'd put a smoking shot on him. I saw my lighted knock disappear. You can see that, Tyler. Did you notice that the lighted knock disappears at some point?
Yep.
And he runs off, crashing through everything, and then it just stops. And I was like, well, maybe he died right over there.
One of the things that you find yourself doing a lot of times when you're hunting public land or thick private land is that you'll end up clipping on with your release, taking your release off, moving around, readjusting, re-clipping your release. And man, sometimes you got to have a really specific tool to be able to do that. Cobra Archery has so many different types of releases. They have the handheld type with a thumb release. They have a dual caliper. They have a hook. There's all different varieties that you can use and be comfortable with. I personally like the hook style. Tyler has a dual caliper one. There's a new version of the Maverick that's like a pinch on. That's really sweet. We've kind of been experimenting with that. So go check out CobraArchery.com and see which type of release will be right for you.
At that point, man, I'll be honest with you. I thought this buck could be a 100-inch buck, or he could be a freaking 145 or something. I just didn't know. I was like, that might be my biggest deer ever. You know, I don't know. I was trying not to concentrate on it. And this isn't my property, so I don't like have cameras or any intel of any kind of deer. I've never had encounters with these bucks before. Like, I'm just kind of playing it by ear, sort of. And so Aaron comes down. I tell him I shot a big buck. He comes down and he stops before he gets to me. He's like, dude, I thought I heard breathing back there, like heavy breathing. I was like, well, maybe I smoked him and he's just over there dying. But I get down and go to the arrow, and about, 10 inches or so is broken off the front of the arrow, and the fletchings and nothing, there's no blood on. All I found was the backside of it. And there was hair, there was a little bit of hair on it, and like a little bitty tiny bit of what looked like it might be blood, like stomach matter or something like that. And then like some fatty looking stuff. And I was like, oh my God, man, I don't know. I really don't know where I hit this deer at. And so we walked a little ways, looked for blood, not a drop of blood. Nothing. We walked about 40 yards to where I heard him stop at to see if he was over there. Nothing over there. So I said, you know what, dude, we just got to back out. I had church tomorrow. So the next day was Sunday, yesterday. And I was like, I can't chance going in after this buck, but I also can't come back first thing in the morning. And I just really need to look at this video footage to be able to even know what the next move is. So we backed out, got back to the truck. I called a tracking dog, a guy I actually go to church with. And
you go to church with all the right people, man.
I know. I've really done a good job with building the right relationships in church. But he's a good friend of mine, and he's done a couple tracks for me already in the past. And I told him kind of what I thought. I told him I had absolutely no idea where I shot him at, but the arrow was broken off. So I just really had to assume that it was a shoulder hit or something like that, or just maybe something freak happened and it just didn't have any blood on it. I've heard, there's no telling what an arrow can do after it hits a deer. Like, no matter whether that deer moves, that deer could move and there's no telling. Mm-hmm. So we made plans. I had to do church yesterday morning. Like, that's my job. So I knew that more than likely, if I smoked this deer, the meat was probably not going to be good, which was a hard call to make. But at the end of the day, when you don't have blood and you don't really have anything to go by, you just can't chance it, and at the end of the day, I'm glad I did, but I'm glad I did what I did, knowing what I know now. But I got home and watched this footage. And when I watched the footage, what it looks like in this footage, and people will be able to see this once I get the video done. It looks like the arrow goes mid-body, like mid-gut, on a quarter-to-way shot, which makes me think that deer's going to be dead in 100 yards, less than 100 yards. And we backed out, so if it just hit guts, that deer's still going to be dead super quick, and the dogs are going to find it real fast. And I was excited. I was happy. With a gut shot, you need to wait 12 hours anyway, so I was very happy with our decision to do what we did. Got up yesterday morning, did worship at the church, met the tracker out there, and we go to the shot. And he's got two dogs. So he's got a dog named Bo, and I could not tell you what kind of dog that is. But then he's got a bigger dog named Tater, and Tater's like a catch dog. He's like what are they called? Is it Catula or Catahoula? Catahoula. Catahoula and cur mix. So it's like a catch dog. Mm-hmm. It's like a big hog dog. And the way he was describing it to me is the big catch dog goes by wind, like wind scent. It's winding everything. So it'll get downwind, whereas his other dog will just follow the actual scent trail of the deer using that gland. They're not actually tracking blood. They're tracking the gland of that specific wounded deer. They've let out a scent out of their hoof. It's actually pretty amazing because everybody thinks they're going by blood and they're actually not. So the catch dog just takes off. As soon as we get there, it takes off and starts going on track. And I said, well, that's the way it went. And he said, well, let's see if Bo gets on starts following that same line. And so we're watching him on the GPS, and it's so crazy how the catch dog, the big one, is probably about 40 yards to the left downwind of where the actual trailing dog is. So it's winding the ground scent of this deer, while the other one is actually on the trail. And they're almost running parallel with each other. It's amazing. And we're following the whole time. We get 100 yards, 200 yards, 300 yards, 400 yards. And he's like, man, they're on a track. He's like, I just don't know what they're tracking because they're going a long ways. And based on that hit, I did not think this deer was going to go that far. And so we go up a hill, like up a steep hill, on top of a ridge. I mean, we're going all over the place, watching it on GPS. But both of these dogs are still tracking together. Neither one of them is splitting from the other. So they're on something. And about 700 yards down, so we went up the hill and down the hill, about 700 yards, we hear the dogs bark down in a real nasty gully. And what happens with these dogs is if they bark, that means the deer is still alive. which was not at all what I expected. And I asked Brian, the tracker, what happens here? Like, what do these dogs bark whenever and he said, yeah, they bark. Sure enough, we heard them bark. And he said, man, that deer's got to be down there unless they're just barking at an armadillo or a raccoon or something that's hissing at them. And so we get down there, and there's the deer laying down in this gully, and it looks dead. And we walk up to it, and it like stretches out and like lifts its head up, and it's hurting bad. And so we put it out, quickly, dispatched of it, which was unfortunate. I mean, honestly, like, no bow hunter wants to know that they basically made a deer suffer that long.
Yeah.
I mean, it was almost 24 hours from the shot. By the time we got to it, it was almost 24 hours from the shot. It was about 3:30 or 4 whenever we got up. No, I'm sorry. It was past that. It was about 5 o'clock once we found the deer. So it had been 23 hours basically from the time I shot it. And Brian, took a knife to it and put it out really quick. That sucks, but on a positive note of that, we got all the meat off of that thing. Like, it was still alive, so the meat was not wasted.
Mm-hmm.
We got the deer. It's an unfortunate best case scenario. Does that make sense? Without
Sure,
sounding, I don't want to sound heartless, because
No.
it definitely doesn't feel good that you didn't put a good shot on the deer. But there is a plus side that I got to keep a hold of that meat.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are, like a mile away from where we shot, like away from any road. And I find myself all of a sudden in a very, very much a public land scenario where it's like, crap, I didn't come out to private land to do this, like to have a mile dragged back. Luckily, I brought my frame pack with me to carry all of my camera gear so I could film everything. And so we just packed it out, man. We packed that buck out, like quartered it up right there and packed it out. I mean, it was definitely dark by the time we got done quartering it. So it was well after dark before we got back to the truck. But it was like probably the most backcountry private land hunt I have ever been on in my life.
You didn't hook a sleigh up to one of them dogs like the Grinch?
Yeah. Yeah, we could have done that. I don't know that the catch dog probably would have done all right with it. But so there's a bunch of crazy things with this. The deer had actually already been hit by coyotes.
Huh.
Coyotes had already tried to get him.
Wow.
Because his rear end was eaten out, basically. That sounded really bad, but it was like bloodied up and all that stuff. And but the deer was still alive. He got away from him, but there was not a drop of blood on the ground anywhere. There was not. We found out that the shot actually ended up hitting straight shoulder, like straight up the leg, as the hardest part of the shoulder, and was as we skinned it out, the arrow, the broke off piece with the broadhead, was actually lodged right under the skin, kind of at the base of the neck. And so it went all the way through him, just not enough to give us an exit.
Mm-hmm.
And probably with every step he took, it was just cutting away down there. But obviously it didn't hit anything crazy vital because he was still alive 23 hours. So we didn't gut it. We just skinned it out, but we got that piece of the arrow back and all that stuff. But the crazy thing is to know that if I had not, I hate to sound like a bandwagon jumper or whatever, if I had not switched to a heavy cut-on contact head, that deer probably lives forever.
Yeah.
Until somebody else shoots him or he dies of natural causes. You're not getting the necessary penetration on that deer with that shot. And so as bad of a shot as it actually ended up being, it's still, Ranch Fairy Troy talks about it all the time, about plan B when things don't go as planned. That was definitely one of those situations where I was super jacked about that decision to switch to a heavier front end, a high FSD definitely saved me there.
That's why we shoot the day 6 stuff, man. It's just, heavy, cut on contact broadheads. And your pins are a little bit wider gap, but, if you can get close to animals, man, it's pretty deadly. And I'm right there with you.
It is. It was a great decision. I've actually, the 2 does that I killed here in Alabama, the first one ran about 10 feet and fell over dead. The second one did the exact same thing. Like, both of them died in sight. I've never had that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a lie. I shot one in the neck. My first bow kill, I shot in the neck. It was a terrible shot, but it only ran like 10 feet. But every other deer, I mean, usually they run like a bat out of hell. Like, they're just getting out of there because something hit them,
Yeah.
With these heavier heads, they just zip through them. They don't even know what happened.
Yeah, real sharp. They're not just pushing like a lot of the stuff does. They're just slicing their way through. It's pretty awesome.
And so here's the cool thing is I'm using the VPA heads, the VPA 175s, 2-blade. We pulled that blade out of the deer, and it was still like razor sharp.
Yeah.
After being in there all day, cutting with every move that deer made, going through a shoulder, it was still sharp. Like, I'll probably touch it up and throw it right back on an arrow.
Yeah, that's cool.
It was cool as heck.
Yeah.
And definitely, so when we got to the deer, here's the thing, like, what I'm about to say is going to sound like I'm not grateful or happy with it. I'm very happy. I would have shot this deer no matter what. But it was like one of those, like, it was the first deer I've ever shot that had ground shrinkage.
Yeah.
Right. And I was not at all disappointed, but I was like, I thought he was going to be bigger than that.
Yeah.
But when you're hunting those thickets like that, when you're hunting thick areas and you have to make quick, like, just very fast decisions, I feel like that's going to happen probably more in my life.
Yeah.
Just because of the areas I choose to hunt, but that's also where these bucks live, you know? That's how you're going to kill them. And so I'm sure that's not the first time that's not the only time that's ever going to happen to me. But it definitely was like, man, I was kind of expecting a little bit bigger deer,
Yeah.
Yeah. We've been there, man.
I know exactly.
We live in Texas, so.
We have width restrictions, so they got to be 13 inches wide, and that's pretty much like what you're keying in on. And when you hunt public land, you get this. If you don't, you may or may not. But sometimes a deer's only in your life for like 10 seconds, and you don't have time to think about score, count points, whatever, even sometimes age, like you can kind of tell big body and small body, but really you have to be able to assess if it's a shooter or not and be able to get your bow and shoot the thing before he walks out of your life, and then that's just kind of tough to do. And I think that's when you really kind of are forced to have the appreciation of just, being thankful that you got to shoot something, you know what I mean, as opposed to being and not that I am anti-trophy hunting by any means, because I'm about to go do some trophy hunting in about a week and a half, hopefully. But, like, whenever you're hunting public, it's just a different game, It's just, you're just doing something different out there. And it's all cool,
And these guys, I get the restriction, I guess, in Texas. I'm not knocking Texas.
I'll knock it for you. It's fine. I'll knock it. Go ahead.
Me too.
Okay, well, then I'll knock it if you guys are. I just didn't want to do it since y'all are Texas based. I think the deal is kind of dumb. I understand antler restrictions.
Yeah.
But unless you're on a place where deer are feeding at a feeder for more than a couple of minutes, you're just not going to be it. My dad, he has land there in East Texas. They live out there pretty close to y'all. And he's got 20 acres of basically river bottom property, and it's pretty thick in there. And he's let a lot of deer walk because he couldn't tell what they were.
Yeah.
Like, he couldn't say 100% that they were 13 inches wide. Like, I feel like it's a little easier to say 4 on one side.
Yeah.
Than 13 inches wide. Like, you're telling somebody that they have to just guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You know who does a great job? And I love this is Oklahoma. Because instead of putting money into regulation, they put money into a campaign that said, let young bucks grow. And they just have signs for that. And if you want to buy into it, you can. If you don't, that's cool too. You know, and I mean, I've said this a few times on the podcast, and people probably are starting to get tired of it, but I'm becoming very libertarian in my views. Pretty much my views are leave me alone. You know what I mean? So, like, when you start trying to just regulate people into doing something, you end up with animosity towards it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the crazy thing there is that you can shoot a spike.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah, does that make any sense?
Spike. but not a 13 or a 12-inch, 5.5-year-old 8-point.
Yeah, man, and that's one of those. This regulation came about. It's been a while since they started doing these antler restrictions, and back when they put them out there wasn't nearly the information out there that there is now in the studies and stuff. Everybody's seen the meme or whatever you want to call it, where there's a spike at 1.5, and then by the time he's 5.5, he's Boone and Crockett or whatever, and they show how that can happen. But 20 years ago or whenever it was when they started this thing, it wasn't that way. They didn't know that spikes. The common culture was that spikes were never going to be anything. So what I'm saying is, the excuse is that it is hard to change laws, and that I'm sure the wardens and everybody else does not like having to change laws very much. So it's easier just to stay with that rule for now, and just one day we'll address it kind of thing,
So my question is this, so my dad shot a buck that was 13 inches wide, actually a little wider, and it's on his wall. Like, it's a good deer.
Yeah.
And the taxidermist, when Dad got it back, I think it was when Dad got it back, the taxidermist was like, "Man, he barely made 13 inches," and it's like, so how do they go by like the drying period? What if the deer, as it dries, it's dry, if it shrinks up a little bit, which it will naturally, and that's when it gets measured. Like, it's just there's so many ways that can just go wrong.
Oh yeah, it's wonky.
An antler, 1 point isn't going to disappear if you were to do a 4 on one side.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't have to guess. There's no guessing game. You can count.
Yep.
They're 4 on one side. You can't say like, let me hold up my ruler to it and say, oh yeah, that's 13. It's just dumb.
It is.
Yeah.
But regardless, I mean, it is what it is. And
I'll tell you this: there's correlation. Correlation does not mean causation, but there is correlation now that we see a much older age class than what we did when Tyler and I were teenagers and preteens. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of things have changed in that time period too. We now have doe days we didn't used to, and all this kind of stuff. So, who knows? In wildlife management, you never can, just straight up put a pin on it on what's for sure done and hasn't. But I will tell you this, there's been a whole bunch of 3-year-old 8s that are 13 or 14 inches wide that get passed by guys who are, conscientious and don't want to mess things up. And those deer end up being really nice 4-year-olds. So, if you're into the trophy side of stuff and you want the biggest deer you can shoot, and most people do, especially in Texas, because you know how Texans are, I guess that's a regulation that makes sense for some people. But for us, it's what we've all talked about. And then, too, it's like, man, when I was a little kid, I shot a forky, and I thought it was the coolest thing that ever happened in my life. Mm-hmm. So they'll never listen to me, but I always have this proposed, first buck ever tag that I would like them to put out to where, if it's your first buck ever, you can shoot whatever you want to. But then after that, start paying attention to the antler regulations.
Yeah, that tag's good for $1.
Yeah, $1 ever
in your lifetime.
Yeah.
And,
well, they might. I mean, y'all are Tyler and KC from the Element. They may listen to that.
You're right, man.
I think my better end is that my mom works for TPWD. I think that's going to be my better end. But
maybe so. I mean, maybe consider that option and then the next option.
Yeah, maybe it's a compilation of things. Might help. But, so, dude. We kind of ended up making this a conversation, but we really, kind of had some questions about your deer and stuff a little bit. Is that like you talked about the frame and all that kind of stuff on that buck. Is that like is that a good deer for the area? Is it a great deer for the area? Or, because one of the cool things about whitetail is that they're so different in all the parts of the country. And I like what you do because you're in a part of the country kind of like us where they don't get super big, comparatively. So, what's that deer like comparatively?
Well, so on that club, that's going to be a pretty. I'm not going to say it's it's definitely not a small deer for that club. I'm going to say it's going to be, a guy might kill one of those deer like that out there during the rut on that club.
Yeah.
He's definitely not going to be like, everybody's going to shoot one,
Mm-hmm.
And that's the crazy thing about it is like most of these guys are out there hunting, 150, 200 yards away from where that deer's ever going to be until he starts chasing does. And so they would have never seen him. They wouldn't even know he existed down there in that bottom. And so I would say for that area, he's going to be, an average decent buck. Most guys are going to shoot that deer.
Cool.
If they see him, if he walks out. You'll have maybe a couple of like pretentious trophy hunting guys that are going to maybe let him walk, but I'm not that at all. I would shot that deer. I would have shot that deer. I would probably tag out on that deer on public for sure.
Yeah.
He's a good buck. I haven't like measured his width or anything like that, but he's got some cool character. I've had a couple guys say that he looks like he's like going downhill. I kind of disagree.
Yeah.
I think he's probably a 2.5 or 3.5 year old deer or something like that.
He looks swampy is what I think. And maybe it's just because it was wet whenever you took the pictures or whatever. But I always like those southern deer that something about it, you just don't get that horn configuration in the Midwest. It just has a different look to it. You know what I mean? So I think it's cool, man.
And the Alabama, like an Alabama strain of deer tend to have like that more white, like really white antlers.
Yeah. And
he had that. And typically with those type of deer, they're, for whatever reason, that like we have a place up here where they have a Michigan strain that they brought in years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that Michigan strain, their antlers are like really dark. They'll get like chocolate.
Yeah.
The Alabama strain just doesn't. Like it just stays white.
Yeah.
And they don't get as big as a lot of those. Now, as I was driving away with the deer packed out in the back of my truck, I almost hit a deer that there's Alabama guys out here going to think I'm smoking crack when I say this. But there was a deer in the middle of the road that I came about 10 feet from hitting that I promise you was a 200 class whitetail.
Oh, man.
I've never seen a deer this big anywhere. I lived in Texas. I lived in West Texas where we got high fences. And I've never seen a deer that looked like this. I mean, he was just a monarch, like just giant. And I got a good solid look at him. And it felt like I was looking at an alien. And then,
sure roped that sucker.
As I'm watching him run off, I'm like, and looking kind of in my back mirror of like my buck, I'm like, and all of a sudden my buck doesn't look very big at all.
It's like, did I shoot a doe? I can't remember.
Yeah, like mine looks like Elliot from Open Season.
That's funny. Y'all have both referenced kid movies while we've been on this podcast, so we know where we're all at.
You know where you're headed.
Well, I have been Frozen's been on my TV pretty much all day today. So
I feel like my TV is Frozen on Frozen. So
it is. Between Paw Patrol and Disney princess movies, like that's pretty much.
You want to know what's real confusing to me is that there's also a movie called Trolls where there's a poppy troll in it, and so I can't tell what we're talking about any of the time. Is it Paw Patrol or Poppy Troll? I don't know.
Luckily, mine's a little younger, so we're still on Winnie the Pooh, which I'm a pretty big fan of. So
You're talking about Princess Poppy. I know her well.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent actor.
Great actor, good singer, great singer, really. Yeah.
Yeah, great singer.
Yeah.
Great singer. But it was cool, man. It was all around, like, I have mixed feelings just for myself. Like, you know, I haven't hunted private land really, not in Alabama, in like 4 years. And so you get so used to like the public land grind and like, you know, just kind of almost got a chip on your shoulder. Like, oh yeah, you hunt your hunt club? Well, I hunt public land, you know?
Yeah.
And here I am notching a tag for a private land hunting club whitetail. And I'm like, man, if there's one way that I would kill a public land or a private land deer, it's like that. Like, I packed the joker out and went up and found the spot. And I've always said, I think I mentioned this earlier, I've always said, like, I'd like to test where I'm at now as a whitetail hunter on a hunting club, which out here, a hunting club gets as much or more pressure than public land that I hunt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was definitely a more pressured area for sure.
That's neat.
And so, you know, you can have the chip on your shoulder of public land, or you can, you know, try to some new challenges, you know, something different. So I've been on cloud nine all day just from it, you know, from the whole experience. I thought it was so cool.
Well, just tell me the most dangerous game is not the next challenge that you're looking for.
No, man. No, I'm a whitetail guy.
Yeah.
I'm headed back to Kentucky in a couple weeks. Then I got a trip to Missouri. And then it's just, after that, it's going to be the heat of the rut where in the areas that I tend to hunt around mid-December. And so, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a good season from here on out. I just always like to have that, like, well, Tyler, you got one, kind of an icebreaker buck, you know? It's like, it doesn't have to be the best buck of my life. Just a buck, you know? It's just, you got to have those.
Dude, bucks are cool, man. Doesn't matter. I mean, there's a very little that matters in the size as much as like just the fact that a whitetail buck is a cool thing, man.
It is. It really is. And maybe, you know, I mean, I always feel better about it because later as the season goes and your standards start to go down, if you haven't killed one, like, it's nice to kill a good, respectable deer so that your standard can stay where you want it to be, you know? And that's always the fun part. And like I said, like, public land's my home. It's like what I do, but, doing this it was definitely a cool experience.
Yeah. That's cool, man.
What's the best way for people to kind of follow you throughout the Missouri and Kentucky and everything else this season?
Yeah, so I have a podcast. It's called Southern Ground Hunting. It's part of the Sportsman's Nation podcast network, and we're kind of trying something this deer season where we're going to kind of alternate, have a guest on 1 week and then kind of recap our last 2 weeks, the next episode, kind of alternate weeks like that. It's just so much easier to not have to get a guest every single week when you're
telling me.
Yeah. You're trying to hunt yourself. I don't know. So, you can follow along there. We'll talk about all that stuff there. And then also on the YouTube channel, you'll be able to see all the hunts, everything that goes on. I'm actually working on, I got the first half of it done today of the hunt from yesterday and day before that. So, everything, I film all the time. So everything that I do will be up on the Southern Ground Hunting YouTube channel.
That's cool, man.
Even in the shower?
Everything I do.
Dang, that's what I'm talking about, dude.
Oh man.
Well,
I'm kind of more of like a Casey Neistat blogger.
Yeah. Yep.
So I just kind of put my whole life. No, not really.
That's good, man. That's good.
It's hunting highlights.
Drone shots from the shower, you know, those are great too, man. It's all good. Yeah.
I've been trying to get creative.
Yeah, for sure. That's good.
All about the angles, man.
Well, we appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, man. Are you going to buy the old Texas tag and us kill a Christmas deer this year?
Man, if I can get to Texas, that's the thing is, like, we usually come to Texas for the holidays, but we're actually going to Arkansas for Thanksgiving because that's where my sister's at. So my parents are going up to Arkansas, and that's when me and Dad are hunting Missouri.
Oh, cool.
So I don't know when the next time I'll be there is, but I can guarantee you that we'll be there at some point to kill some hogs.
Oh, yeah.
Let's do it, dude. I mean, we know where those are, so come on.
Oh yeah, I'm in it. I am definitely in it. And my dad actually has been kind of scouting out a little piece of public around where he lives. And so at some point we're going to go check that out together and just, look at it and see what we can find.
Take a look at it. That's good, man. Well, sounds like you got a good season lined up, man. I wish the best for you. I know every time you shoot a deer and you're unsure about it, you're going to be texting me for a prayer, I guess. So
Yeah.
I guess I'm going
to start a prayer. Growing up in church, my dad's a pastor. We had a prayer chain, and it's basically all the old ladies in the church that pray for everything. And,
Yeah.
And so people would call with prayer requests, and my mom would say, well, I'll put it on the prayer chain. And I'm going to start a deer hunting prayer chain.
There you
There you
go,
go, man.
Man, I've been thinking about something. We'll talk about this offline, but I got some ideas, man. We need to bounce them a little bit.
Yeah. I'm hoping, honestly, I truly hope I don't have to pray for you anymore this season, though. I just hope we make good shots,
I hope that the shot prayers were not going to be existing anymore with my heavy arrow setup, but
Yeah.
it happens.
Yeah, it does, man. Well, best of luck this year, man. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks, guys. You too.
Man, what an awesome story about a big buck. Guys, we want to say a big thanks to Exodus Trail Cameras and Cobra Archery for being a part of this big buck breakdown.
For sure, man. And also, if you want to check out what we do on a daily basis, maybe even see some of these big bucks, go to Instagram and follow us at The Element Wild. And then also subscribe on YouTube to keep up with what we're doing throughout the season. And subscribe on the podcast. And remember, this is your element.
Live in it.
I'll swim across and meet you on the other side. I'm not sure why we even have to fight. We grew up in the same situation. The river between us caused a lot of frustration. Brothers, let's forgive and forget.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.